Hey guys, hi everyone, good evening. Hello everyone, hi. I'm so sorry, there was some background noises, so I have to shut them first and then let's start. Okay, let's start. So I hope first of all everyone is here, everyone is doing good. So how is everyone doing, guys? Hi everyone. Hello guys, good evening. Hi Sharat, hi Nisar, hi everyone. Good evening. Please, I request all of you to please share this video with your friends, so that we can start as soon as we can. Hi Idris, hello, hi. How is everyone doing? Everyone doing good? Perfect. Hey Jashmeet, hi Jashmeet. Great. So I can see people are joining right now. So let's start. We'll be starting in 2 minutes. But I request to you before we start, I request all of you to please share this video with your friends and family so that we can start very soon. Okay. So please do let me know in the chat as well. Let me share my screen and please do let me know if my screen is visible or not. Is my screen visible, guys? Hey everyone. Hi guys. Hi everyone. So I can see people are joining. Please share this video. Please share this session link with all of your friends, of your colleagues, so that we can start with this session. And trust me, guys, today's session is going to be the most important session that we will have in this entire course of JavaScript. Okay. And if you remember properly, let's start. So, if you remember properly, in our previous classes, we have actually decided and discussed a little bit of JavaScript, the introduction part of JavaScript. We understood what JavaScript is, then we understood what it is data types are, then we understood what operators are, and then finally we understood what conditional statements are, and then we understood what loops are, and finally in our previous class we started and tried to understand what functions are. So I hope until now there is no confusion that we might be facing in whatever we have been discussing now in our previous class until now. In our previous class, if you remember, I have told you that our next class is going to be very important, right? Very much excited as well and informative as well. Well, there's a reason for that. Why I said that? Because today's class is not just important from the perspective of learning JavaScript, but also from the perspective of interviews as well. In today's class, we will try to learn at least three parts of our JavaScript, which you might use very often in JavaScript, and then the interviewers very much ask these questions as well. Guys, let's try to understand first of all one thing, which I have already told you. Whenever we try to write our JavaScript code, in order to execute this JavaScript code, we need a JavaScript environment, right? So browsers already has that environment which is called Chrome's V8 engine in Google Chrome, with help of which our browsers are able to execute JavaScript code. Then if we want the same JavaScript environment in our local system so that we can execute JavaScript outside of browsers as well, what do? We actually install Node.js. But let's try to understand very importantly, very wonderful thing about JavaScript, which is this. Usually in most of the interviews, I would say this is 5-star important question. You might receive a question from the interviewer that, hey, what happens when you actually execute JavaScript, and how does actually my JavaScript execute its code? So this is a very important question that we need to understand. What happens when you write all of the code, and how does my JavaScript engine execute my JavaScript code? In order to understand that, let's first of all create a small code. Okay. So let me create a new file and I'm going to name it call stack. Okay. Callstack.js. It is not like if you don't know JavaScript, it will be still a very informative class for all of you. Although I will write minimum code in today's class, but there will be a lot of information related to JavaScript. Okay, so please Keep in touch, stay in the class until end, and please share this video with your friends and your family as well, so that they can learn also some cool things about JavaScript. Let's try to create a simple code. I will simply say console dot log, and I want to simply console, let's suppose my name, which is Adfar. Perfectly fine. After that, I will define a variable where n is equals to, let's suppose, 20 over there. Okay. I will say console.log n. Okay. If I execute this, you all know that Adfer will be in the output and n value in the out will be in the output. So if I execute this, you can properly see over there it displays Adfer and 20. Very wonderful. Perfectly fine. After that, let me create a simple function. We have already discussed functions in our previous class, and let's try to create a function, and let's suppose the number of name of the function is double, and it receives an argument which is x over there. And what does it do inside this particular thing? I create another variable which is going to be twice over there, in which I will simply tell it x into x. Okay. And then if I try to simply return this twice over there, you will automatically understand that the entire functionality of this function double is to actually multiply this argument to itself and then return that number. Right? Simple. Now, a small question to all of you. If I simply console my double function over there and try to pass an parameter, an argument over there, which is 3, what will be the output for this particular function? Tell me quickly in the chat. So if I execute this, what do you think will be the output for this particular code? I have a function double who is receiving an argument x, the value of that x is 3, then this function is simply finding the square of that number. So 3 square is 9. So we all know if I try to execute it, the last output is 9. But we already know the output, right? The most important thing over here is to understand actually how we got for 20 and 9 in the output. Let's try to understand that. Okay. So what I will do is I will simply cut this particular code. Although let me cut it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply cut this code and try to add it inside my new page over there to understand it. Okay. Let's try to understand. Let's try to break this code. Please pay attention. This is very important. Okay. At least you will get an idea about JavaScript, that how JavaScript executes its code. Sure, Idris, just give me a second. I will, what is this called? Explain that in few minutes as well. But let's try to first of all understand what actually this code does and how it is executed. Let's try to understand that. Okay. We all know in our day one that JavaScript is single-threaded synchronous language. Single-threaded synchronous language. We all know that. What does that mean? That means when this JavaScript code will be executed, the lines will be executed line by line. So first this will be executed, then only it will move to this, then only it will move to this, and then rest of the function, and then this. Which means it will simply execute my lines of code line by line. And we all know in order to execute this code, we need a JavaScript engine. Let's suppose we have that engine over there. Now, as soon as this is a code, I am writing it in a file which is index.js, guys. Yes or no? Then this index.js will be simply given to JavaScript engine over there. And this JavaScript engine actually executes my code and actually provides me the output, which is all of the output that we saw in the terminal over there. But let's try to understand what happens inside this particular JavaScript engine. Let's try to understand that when a code is given to this JavaScript engine, what actually happens to this code line by line, right? And we all know, and remember this, whatever I will discuss, it won't be the entire JavaScript engine, because JavaScript engine has a lot of other components as well. There is parser, there is compiler, there is interpreter. You don't have to understand that. We will only understand the execution context of it. Okay. Now let's understand this. So let's suppose I simply have given this file index.js to this JavaScript engine over there, and it starts executing the code. Now we all know and have understood one very important thing, that my execution will happen line by line. So you can see my execution will start from the line 1. So let's suppose it has now started. It has not even executed a single line of code. It will now execute. Every single time, whenever your JavaScript code starts to execute, it it actually creates two things. The first thing over there is inside its execution context, it actually breaks my execution context in two parts. Number one will be the memory part of that. Number two over there will be code part of that. And all of this is happening inside JavaScript engine. And we all know every browser has their JavaScript engine pre-installed in them, right? So when my JavaScript engine creates these two parts of the program, it creates it even before executing a single line of code. Even before executing a single line of code. Now, what happens? This is called execution context. These two parts are called execution context over here. Okay. Now, when it starts to execute this code, even if it has not executed a single line of code, it creates memory part and code. This is also called a variable environment. Variable environment, although it's not, it is a bigger term than variable environment, but usually we can refer it as that as well. Inside this particular memory section, what happens? There are actually saved key value pairs. I will properly make you, I will show you actually this in our browser, inside our engine, how actually all of these things are happening. I will properly make you visualize them. Okay. Now, inside this memory, simply key value pairs are simply stored. But of what? Key value pairs of what? Of all the variables and functions. So जितने भी मेरे पास variables हैं, जितने भी functions हैं, उनका एक key value create हो जाता है. So if you closely look at this particular code, this memory simply takes a kind of a snapshot of it in order to create a key value pair for its variables and for its functions over there. Now let's try to understand. Let's try to put this particular variable over there. How many variables are there, guys? You can see there's n variable only. And also there's a function. There is double function over there. Now, some of you might say, actually, sir, there is a one another variable which is twice. But you need to understand this execution context that I am talking about right now. It is entirely about global execution context. Is this variable defined in the global scope? No, it is defined for this function only. So automatically this variable scope will be covered inside this double as well. So let's try to understand that. Okay. So we have only n and we have only double. Let's suppose if there are any other variables inside our global scope as well, inside our other functions inside our global scope as well, all of those key value pairs will be created over here as well. Okay. But what will be this value that will be stored in front of them? You will remember one thing. I will show you exactly how it happens. You will remember one thing. Whenever this code is executed, it has not even executed a single line of code. So it does not know what is it's stored inside this particular variable. Does it know what is after this n equals to? No. Why? Because it has not executed. It is trying to start the execution, which means by default, in front of all the variables, undefined will be there. Because it does not know what is the value that will be stored in front of these variables. And in front of functions, it will actually put all of the function code over there. All of the function code will be placed. So this entire code over there is simply taken and pasted over there. Let's try to understand this in our output and let's try to visualize it, whether this happens or not. So let me create a new file and I will simply name it call stack ht.html over here. And let me simply try to create an HTML file. If you don't know what HTML file is, HTML is a file which is actually used to create web pages. Actually, later on, you will later on see that this JavaScript is actually included inside the same HTML file to make our web pages dynamic. But we will maybe understand that in our next course, okay? So what will I do? I will simply write a script tag over there. Script tag simply means inside this HTML, now you are allowed to write JavaScript code. But if you don't use this script tag, if you directly paste the JavaScript code, it will display some errors. So I will simply go over there, execute this code and format my document. So whatever code I had over there, I actually simply pasted that inside my HTML document. Can anyone tell me in the chat why actually we need to paste this inside our HTML? Because we know we have to see how engine is going to treat this JavaScript code, and we all know that engine is already, I have that engine already inside my browsers. So I will simply open this HTML page inside my browser to actually properly visualize what happens with this code. Now, if you closely look onto this web page that I created, there's nothing. Is there anything? Absolutely not, right? So let me simply try to inspect in this page to check where that JavaScript code is. So if you inspect on this, you will find one of the tabs over there which is called sources. But if you want to see what that JavaScript is going to give you output, you can check console. If I check the console, you can see Adfar 20 and 9, the same output that my JavaScript over here displayed as well. So you can also execute your JavaScript inside your browsers as well, but which we have already discussed in our previous classes. Okay. Now let's move a little bit forward over there. Let's try to understand how my JavaScript engine is going to treat this particular file. Okay. So if I click on sources, you can see if I click on this file, I actually can now see my JavaScript code over there. Now, what do I need to do? I need to tell my JavaScript engine over there, hey, execute my lines of code over there line by line. Don't execute them together as one. No, execute them line by line so that I can properly visualize over there what is happening with my code over there, how my JavaScript engine is treating it. So what I will do is I will simply click on this line number 10, because line number 10 is the line from where my code is starting to execute. So let me simply click on it. You can see a blue mark got over there. This blue mark simply means I am adding a breakpoint to check what is right now happening with respect to our execution onto this line over there, and then I can move line by line over there with respect to my execution as well. So in order to check what's happening, I will simply refresh the page. But before I refresh my page, let's try to put a little bit focus on the right side. Do you see over there it says scope? It says something which is call stack. Scope is nothing but my memory. Scope is nothing but my memory, right? And this call stack is something which we will discuss in few minutes. So if I refresh my page over here, you will see inside my scope there is something over there now which is global. Earlier it was not there, there was no global. But as soon as I refresh my page, keeping my breakpoint over here, you can see it actually is displaying global inside my scope. Now, if you closely look at this picture, I told you inside my global memory. This memory is right now inside global over there, in which I have two key value pairs, which is n and double. So let's try to find this n and double inside my particular memory, which is global memory over there. So if I open this global over here, you can see lot of key value pairs. You don't have to worry about them. These key value pairs are actually implemented by the browser on this particular HTML file, which is default, which will happen to every HTML file. But I am interested in the variables that I myself declared. Do you see n over there, which is undefined? Exactly how I showed you. So this n is right now undefined. Why is it undefined? Because my executor has not even executed a single line of code, which means when my JavaScript engine is about to start the execution of code, two things gets created. Number one is the global, which is memory over there, in which I will get key value pairs. All the variables will be given a value which is undefined. But what happens with this double, which was function? You can see in front of this double over there, whatever my function was, it is directly pasted over there. So there is no undefined over there. So there is no undefined over there, and you can clearly check that over here as well. Why is there no undefined? Because there is no equal to sign. It can directly read this code over here. So right now I can say JavaScript is a little bit advanced as well. In terms of what? In terms of even if it has not executed a single line of code, but it still have inside the memory this double function over there. So don't you think I will be able to call my function even before declaring it? Yes, but we will see that later on. Okay, so our first phase is done. So if you closely look at this particular line of code over there, there is no other variable inside this particular scope, so there will be no key value pairs. Now what will happen? So memory phase is absolutely done. So we have checked that in our output as well, how all of these key value pairs are created. Is there any confusion? Please put some yes or no in the chat. Okay, उससे थोड़ा सा मजा आ जाता है. I feel like people are interacting with me. Okay, so please put a yes or no in the chat. Okay, now let's move a little bit forward over there and let's try to understand. Now memory is done. Now there's a time. Now it is time to properly execute the code. How does my browser execute this JavaScript code over there? So it will simply take this code over there that I have and simply paste it inside the code. And now it will start the execution line by line. And how does it execute it line by line? Because we know JavaScript is single threaded synchronous. So what it is going to do, it is going to execute this. As soon as it executes this, you will see inside console there will be adfer, because it now knows what I have to do over there. Similarly, it will execute this line of code. But as soon as this line of code is executed, can I say now it knows what n value is? So it means as soon as it executes this line of code, it will actually update my n over there from undefined to the value that it actually has, which is 20. Okay, after that, since it updated, is it going to display anything? No, it is not going to display anything. But after that, my executor breakpoint will reach over here and it will try to execute this line of code. But as soon as it executes this line of code, what does console.log n mean? It means go inside the memory and get me what is the value stored in front of n. Now since it knows what the value is, we can clearly say that this particular line will display 20 over there. This particular line will display 20 over there. Now let's try to understand at least until now. Okay, let's try to do some changes in the output. उसके बाद हम functions पे जाते हैं फिर से. I have a small question for all of you. We understood. Let me even delete this function for some time. Let's suppose I don't have a function inside this particular code. I'm simply cutting it out. Perfectly fine. Can I say right now, if I write instead of other, if I write n over there, I am saying simply n, console.log n. What's going to happen at that point of time? We all know, even if it has not executed a single line of code, it will still create two parts of it. Number one is going to be the memory, number two is code. Inside memory, what's going to happen? It's going to simply create key value pairs of variables. Although there's only one variable, so there will be only one key value pair related to the program that we have. But we all know my executor is over here, which means it has not even executed a single line of code. That automatically means in front of this n, we will have undefined. Now, memory part is done. So what will happen? This whole code will be taken and pasted inside the code execution part of my global execution context, which means at that point of time when this line of code will be executed, what does it mean? It means go inside memory, tell me what is stored inside n, and give me the value of that. So what will it display right now? Will it display on line number 1 n or undefined? It does not know whether 20 is stored in front of n or not. Why? Because I am trying to access the n first, then later on I am declaring it. So if I execute it in this case, you will see automatically in the output it says the first console undefined. Why does it say undefined? Because we need to check that it is trying to access this particular memory location from my memory, which means at that point of time it is undefined. But how does this particular thing display 20? It does display 20 because inside memory now n is created in front of which I have 20 over there. So that is the difference, and there's a concept related to this as well, where you are able to access the memory locations even before declaring it, and that concept is called a hoisting. H, not hosting but hoisting, which we will discuss at the end of today's class. Okay, so let's not discuss it at this point of time. So I hope related to variables it is right now clear. Okay, now let's move a little bit forward and let's get our function back. Okay, let's get our function back. We all know that until this particular line of code, we have executed our code inside our console. We have adfer and 20. But after that, our executor will come over here, है ना? मेरा जो जावास्क्रिप्ट इंजन है ये अब इस लाइन पे आएगा and it will try to execute this function. But have I not already told you that when we talk about functions, functions are also mini programs of our entire application. So for this JavaScript engine, this particular function will be completely ignored. Why? Because I have already told you functions only get executed when you invoke them. So if you do not invoke your functions, they will never do their work. So in order to make your function executable, you have to invoke it, you have to call it with its name, and then follow the arguments if any. Okay, pass the arguments if any. Now since my code for this particular line is ignored, which means now my JavaScript engine executor will reach at this point of time. And over here, we need to understand one very important thing. And what is that? Over here is since it is a mini program, don't you think for this mini program there should be a separate execution context that will be dedicated to this mini program only? So as soon as it actually experiences, detects this function invocation for this function only over there, for specifically this function over there, my another execution context will be created inside the code part of my global execution context, but this execution context will be called function execution context. Why it is called function execution context? Because it is dedicated to this function only. So this, since it's also execution context, we will have a memory phase for it as well, we will have code phase for it as well. So you can see inside memory what happens. We all know inside memory we will have key value pairs. Key value pairs of what? All the variables that that particular program contains. We all know it contains x, it contains twice. Does it contain anything else? No, it does not contain anything else. So I will simply have x over there. But since we are already passing the value of x to this, this is argument value of 3 as argument to this value of x, so x will be automatically 3. But what will be stored in front of twice? Since we know it has not executed a single line of code, so it does not know what is stored in front of twice, so automatically in front of it there will be undefined only. Now my memory phase is automatically done. So whatever it was supposed to do inside this memory part of this function execution context, it has created that. So what's going to happen now? This function code will be simply taken, this much of code, and it will simply execute it over here. Now I remember someone asked in the chat, sir, please explain the concept of return. What does return do? Let's try to understand that what does return do over here. Okay, so can I say right now this whole function that I have, it will be simply taken whatever the name of it is and pasted inside this code because it has to be executed over there only. So what's going to happen? It will come at this particular line of code and it will try to execute this code. So what is it executing? It's executing twice variable. It will simply go and check what is x. So x is 3. So 3 into 3 is 9. So I automatically know as soon as this line of code is executed, since it already knows what 3 is inside my memory, it will simply calculate the value of twice and put 9 in front of it. But as soon as it prints 9 in front of it, after that you actually experience a statement over there which is called a return. What does this return do? Return simply means that whatever I am trying to return, simply send this value to the function invocation where it was invoked, and make sure you actually stop the execution of this function. The execution of this function over there is stopped. Please try to understand that. So we need to understand over here, we need to understand return means stop the execution of function, and then from where this function was invoked, send this value to that invocation. Yes or no? Am I clear, guys? Am I clear? So we need to understand over there, whenever and every single time in any programming language, whether I talk about Java, whether I talk about C, whether I talk about JavaScript over there, inside functions you will always experience return statement over there. Return statement simply means stop the execution of this function, and then whatever I am returning, return this value to the place where it was invoked. And where was it invoked? So this execution will be done, it is completed, but this value will be returned to the execution, to the place where this function was executed over there. So automatically, since I have 9 over there, I am telling it to console as well. So first thing that's happening over here, this execution context, as soon as it checks over their return, this execution context gets deleted. But at the same time, we have this twice, which is the value that this function returns. It will be sent to the invocation where it was invoked. So that is why now after this adfer and 20, we will have 9 in the output as well, which means now this line of code is also executed. What after that? There's nothing after that. So what is going to happen after that? Even this execution context will be deleted now as well. So at the end, you must understand, when all of the code of JavaScript is executed, so we must understand my execution context, every single execution context gets deleted. Now let's try to see the same thing in our output. Okay, let's try to see the same thing in our output. Give me a second. Okay, someone is perfect. So let's try to see the same thing in our output. I have already I'm already currently in the output. Let's try to execute the same line of code. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh my page, I'm going to go inside inspect, I'm going to go inside sources. You can see right now, if I refresh my page, exactly what I told you will be in the console. That is over here, adfer 20 and 9. This I can see inside my console because that's what my JavaScript program is doing. But what are we interested in? We are interested in how does my browser execute this code. So for that, let's try to go inside sources. I will simply put my breakpoint on line number 1 so that I can visualize line by line what's happening with respect to my execution context, with respect to the memory that I have. Now, please pay close attention because this part will properly resolve your all doubts if you have any doubts related to this particular concept. Okay. So over here, let me refresh my page now. So if I refresh my page over there, you can properly see as soon as I refresh my page, something happened on the right side. So I am telling you to pause my execution at this breakpoint, which is the line number 1. And we can automatically understand according to how I visibly showed you, n will be undefined initially, double will be the function. So let's try to visualize that. So I will go inside the global, which is a memory inside my global scope. So you can see in front of double over there, I can see the whole function, the function code that I actually wrote inside my program, which is absolutely clear. So we can conclude one thing over here. Whenever my JavaScript code starts executing its code, which means it has not even executed a single line of code, but now it will try to execute it. Two things happen: memory gets created, and code execution part of it gets created. But in memory, it kind of takes a snapshot of all the code, and it will simply store it in the key value pair. Keys will be all variable declarations, and then other keys will be all the functions. So if there are n number of functions, I will also get n number of keys. And if there are n number of variables, I will also get n number of keys that will be dedicated to those variables only. But since it has not executed a single line of code in front of all the variables, undefined will be there because it does not know what is after this equal to sign over there. But for all of my functions, it is directly going to take the whole code and paste it in front of the keys that it actually refers to. So you can see double has all of the function code over there according to the code that I have written in front of this function. And then if I try to see n over there, if I try to see n is over here undefined. Very good. Now let me execute code line by line. That's what I executed over here as well. मैंने इस वाले कोड को line by line execute किया था. So if I simply click on this arrow, it means move to the next line. It means move to the next line. So if I click on this particular arrow over here, you can see as soon as I move to next thing inside my console, there is adfer. There's no 20, there's no 9, which my program was actually doing, but only adfer. Why? Because only this line of code is executed. Now my breakpoint is over here. So my executor right now is on this line. On this line, is my n updated? No. Why? Because it has not executed it. It is on this line. So now if I execute this line of code, you will see now n will be properly updated as well, which you can see n is equals to 20. And also another thing, I have told you when I click on next, it will completely ignore these lines of code. Let's try to visualize that as well. So if I click on next, you can see my executor directly came over here. So it is right now on console.log double three, right? And you can automatically see inside my console now there is 20 written as well, which I exactly showed you as well. But if I now click again, now all of the code is executed. You can see inside console there is 9 as well. But although we understood what's happening inside memory, I hope if you do not understood it, please put in the chat that you're facing some confusions. Okay, I might repeat it, but if it is clear, please put a yes in the chat or some emoji as well. Okay, so we understood what happens to variables, what happens to functions. But I also told you one another point over there that whenever this particular function over there is invoked, it will go inside this particular function. And when it goes inside this particular function, a separate execution context will be actually dedicated to it. Let's try to see that over here. And also, I also told you one another thing. When that separate execution context will be dedicated to it, that execution context will have its own memory, will have its own code. Let's try to see that. So I will, instead of putting a breakpoint over here, I will simply tell it to put a breakpoint inside the function itself, which means I have invoked this function. I am trying to visualize what's happening inside this function. But don't you see right now, inside my scope, apart from global, I have another memory as well, which is local. Local means right now, wherever my execution is happening, it is local to that particular block as well. As soon as you will come out of this block, this local will be simply removed from a memory as well. So if I right now open this local, which is the memory dedicated to this function only, you can see there is twice. Twice is undefined, x is 3. Have I not exactly shown you over there x is 3 and twice was undefined? Then I later updated to 9. So you can see over here twice is undefined, x is 3. Now let me click on this so that it can execute this line of code. So if I right click on this, you can see now twice is updated as well. So earlier it was undefined, now it is 9. If I again click on it, it will come out of this function. But as soon as it comes out of this function, do you see right now any local? No, you don't see any local. Why? Because whatever work for that local was, it has done that. So we don't require it now. Now after that, finally, you will see one another very important thing. I have also told you one another thing over here. Let's try to understand that, which is this. When this function will be invoked, when this function will be invoked, inside the code of the first execution context, inside the code part of my first global execution context, on top of that, this execution context will be created. अब उसको देखते हैं. So if you closely look over there, when I am inside this particular function, don't you see right now this call stack? There is some anonymous, and on top of anonymous, I have double. Yes or no? So what does that mean? That means anonymous is my global over there, global execution context. And currently, I am on top of anonymous global execution context. I am inside double execution context. And I also told you one another thing. As soon as this function will return its value to this particular global execution context, because it was invoked from the global execution context, this will be deleted over there. Let's focus on that as well. So if I right click over here, if I again, right now it's on the return, if I again right click, it will return the value. But as soon as it returns, do you see right now double on top of anonymous? No. Why? Because its execution context now is deleted as well. So we can conclude only two things right now, although three things. Number one is whenever JavaScript is executed, it takes a snapshot of it. While taking a snapshot of it, it creates memory of it and code part of it. Inside memory, it simply stores key value pairs of all the variables of all the functions. And then inside my code, finally creating all of the memory locations, it simply executes my code line by line and updates the memory accordingly. But if there is any function invocation for that particular function, it will actually dedicate a separate execution context for that function invocation only, and that will simply create its own memory dedicated to that function only. And similarly, same things are going to happen again and again. There are a lot of other concepts that we need to discuss in this execution context, but we don't have enough time for this in today's session. But I gave you a quick overview of actually how my code is executed. But I will simply teach you one very another very important concept, which is at least asked whenever you sit in the interviews for JavaScript. Out of 10 times, 8 times will be the time when this question will be asked. 8 times at least. Let's try to understand that. Let me remove this line of code. Let me remove this line of code. Okay, even let me remove all of the code. Perfectly fine. I will define a variable where a is equals to 10. Okay. Then I will define a function, and that function will be have a name. Let's suppose greet. And then what it's going to do is it's going to simply console.log. It's going to simply say good morning. Okay. Then if I go a little bit down, if I simply say console.log a over there, if I execute, you can properly see 10 in the output over here. Very good. If I simply call my function over there with its name, calling means putting brackets in front of it. It means invoking that function. So if I execute this now, there will be 10 as well as good morning. Very good. Everything is good. How does it know there is 10 inside a? Because right now you can see my memory has been updated. There was undefined in memory has been updated with this particular variable. And also I can say I am declaring first, then I am accessing it later. Hannah, I am declaring it first, then accessing it later. It automatically means I will have a value of it. Similarly, I am defining my function first, then trying to access it later, invoke it later. So it is properly working over there. Now let me do a small change over there. I will simply remove this and put it over there and paste it here, which means this is a special case right now. I am trying to access the variable even before declaring it. I am declaring my a variable on line number 2, but accessing it on line number 1. What will be there? Will there be any error, guys? Come on, tell me in the chat. Will there be any error? Because we need to understand JavaScript entirely works differently. If you talk about maybe with respect to other language, there's a huge possibility it will display error, because on line number 1 it does not know what a is. But JavaScript works entirely differently. Even before executing a single line of code, it takes a snapshot of it, which means all the variables, although it has not executed a code, all the key value pairs for all my variables are still stored inside my variables, inside my memory, as undefined being the value, which means on line number 1 over there, it will have the value of a, but not exactly what the value of a is, but as undefined, because that's what we have understood. So if I drag a little bit down, you can see console.log a defines undefined in the output. Very good. So I can understand, although I'm not getting a, but I'm not also getting an error as well, which usually is a case with respect to other programming languages. Let's try to understand that. There's a huge possibility with respect to other programming language, I might get an error. But over here, I am not getting an error. Why? Because JavaScript works differently, and I have shown you how it works. With this, it is related to our variables. But what if I will try to call my function first, then define it later? I have invoked my function on line number 3, but I am calling this function later on. I'm declaring this function later on. Sorry. So in this case, should it also define undefined, display undefined, or should it display any error? You will be surprised to see that if I execute it, it will display good morning over there. Why does it display good morning? The answer lies over here. So if I simply take my breakpoint over there, refresh my page, you will see even if it has not executed a single line of code inside my memory over there, I still have access of whole function, whatever the function is. इसका मतलब ये है कि मेरे पास अगर एक भी लाइन एग्जीक्यूट नहीं हुई है ना, तब भी मेरे पास जो भी फंक्शन के रिलेटेड कोड है वो ऑलरेडी मेरे मेमोरी में है. तो इसका मतलब है अगर यहाँ पे आप देखोगे, when I am trying to call it, it will not call it inside this VS code, but ये मेमोरी में जाएगा. मेमोरी में देखेगा क्या कोई ग्रीट नाम का कोई फंक्शन है, and we all know there is. On the line number first there is, on line number second there is, on line number third there is. तो अगर हालांकि if you see I have declared my function on line number 4 to 6, but even on line number 1 inside my memory there is proper code that is related to my functions over there. That is related to my functions over there in my memory. You need to understand that. So जब आप यहाँ पे कॉल करते हो ना, ये इस कोड पे नहीं जाता, ये मेमोरी में जाता है और मेमोरी में देखता है कि वहां पे फंक्शंस हैं, देयर आर प्रॉपर फंक्शंस. सो दैट इज व्हाई इफ आई एग्जीक्यूट इट, यू कैन ऑटोमेटिकली सी good morning is there. And whenever we do a thing that looks like this, which means I am trying to access my variables even before declaring it, I am trying to call my functions even before declaring the function, this concept inside my JavaScript is called hoisting, which is the most important concept with respect to interviews, at least until now, whatever we have discussed. So this hoisting concept is asked every single time. I have told you if 10 times interview happens, 8 times hoisting will be asked. So this is a very important question. If anyone asks you, hey, explain me hoisting in JavaScript, you will simply say, actually, sir, JavaScript supports hoisting. By that, I simply mean we can access our functions, we can access our variables over there even before declaring them. And whenever we do that, that is called hoisting inside our JavaScript. It is not maybe possible with other programming language, but in JavaScript, it is completely possible over here. Let's move a little bit forward. With respect to this particular hoisting only, if you remember in our previous class, I showed you multiple types of functions. One of them was function statements, in which we simply write function keyword, we write a function name, and we perform whatever we want to perform. Then there's another type of function which is called a function expression. Function expressions are those functions in which we simply store our functions in a variable. So, how is my hoisting going to perform with respect to this? Like, how will my hoisting behave with respect to this function expression? Let's try to see that. So, let me simply copy this and let me simply paste this inside this particular file. So, what I'm going to do is I'm simply creating a function over there. Name of the function is not greet. Let's suppose it is my name. Okay, my name is the name of the function. So, please tell me in the chat, what do you think is going to happen with this function? Although it's also a function, if I try to simply call my function over there, you will automatically see it will also work. If you see, it displays adfer. But what will happen if I try to invoke it before declaring it? What do you think is going to happen? You will be surprised to see. Let me comment this. Let me comment this console as well. You will be surprised to see with respect to this particular function, it will not display actually adfer, but it will display undefined over there. Why does it display undefined? Although it says my name is not a function. So let me do one thing over here. Instead of declaring, invoking it directly, I will simply say console.log my name over there. So if I right now execute this, you will probably see over there undefined in the output. Why do you see undefined? Because although this is a function that I am having, but it is stored in front of a variable. And I have told you, doesn't matter what the value we store in front of variable, all the variable key value pairs inside my memory by default will have undefined stored in front of them as soon as we try to start executing our code. That is why, if I simply, let me show you that as well. So let me copy this code. Okay, let me copy this code and let me simply paste this over here inside our HTML file so that we can properly visualize this in our output over there. By output, I mean inside our browser. So let me remove these comments as well. Let me format the document quickly and let's go inside our browser. Let me remove this breakpoint for a second. Let me refresh my page. So if I refresh my page, you can see undefined, good morning, undefined. Why does it display that? So let me simply put a breakpoint over there. Let me refresh my page. But as soon as I refresh my page, are there two functions or are there two variables inside this code? What do you think? Do you think there are right of two functions or there are two variables? I would say, from the perspective of memory, there's only one function, but there are two variables. From the perspective of functions over there are two variables, but only one function. But with perspective of coding, there are two functions as well, two variables as well. So if you closely look, a is undefined, which we already know because it's a normal variable. But the problem over here is conflict over here is with respect to this particular code. है ना? It's a function, but also it's a variable. So you will over here see, if I drag a little bit down, go to the M, you can see it is undefined. It is not having the code, but my greet will have code. So right now you need to understand the difference, and this is also asked in the interviews, guys. What is the difference between my function statement, which is a function statement, this is the function statement, and function expression, this is the function expression. What is the difference between function statement and function expression? This difference is, when I am trying to access the function statement, even before declaring it, it is allowing me to access it, which means hoisting properly works with respect to function statement. But if I talk about with respect to function expression, hoisting does not properly support, it displays undefined. So that is actually the difference between what, between my function statement and function expression. So that is the difference, and you will always tell it in this way as well. So we have learned at least 3-4 concepts in today's class. Okay, and number one is, we have learned what global execution context is, right? What call stack is. Call stack is nothing, but you can see over here the visualization. As soon as I close this, you can see call stack. Inside call stack, all the execution context will be stored on stack. Like stack of books, stack of money, एक दूसरे के ऊपर हो जाएंगे सारे के सारे कॉल स्टैक्स, जितने भी कॉल स्टैक्स इन्वोक हो जाएंगे फॉर नेस्टेड फंक्शंस व्हिच वी हैव सीन. तो हमारे पास ये हमने सबसे पहली चीज सीखी. Then we saw that for all the function invocation, separate dedicated execution context will be associated to it. And for that separate execution context, separate memory will be given to it. And that's called a local memory, which we also visualized over here as well. And then finally, we saw a concept in our today's class, which is called hoisting. And hoisting is very important. And the interview question related to hoisting can be, hey, what is the difference between function statement and function expression? The difference is function expression is stored in variable, which means hoisting will not be properly supported to it, but function statement is not stored in a variable, which means hoisting will be properly supported to it. That is the difference. I hope we are good with today's class. So quickly, guys, tell me in the chat, are we good? Come on, guys, in the chat. Are we good, guys? Come on in the chat quickly. Everyone. So I hope, if there are any doubts, please do let me know as well. Okay, and please share this video with your friends and family. And also, guys, LaMiCons, you can see there's a link that LaMiCons has shared. Okay, please fill this form so that you can get a free certificate out of this course. In our next class, we will continue the discussion on arrays, and we will try to see what arrays are. Okay, so thank you so much for joining, guys, and thank you so much for attending today's session. See you on Thursday with much more JavaScript, and let's make sure everyone joins that session as well. Thank you so much for joining this session. Bye, everyone. Have a great night ahead. Good night. Bye, everyone.